Awesome. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Yes, my name is Nikita Kimberly. I am a health education specialist from Rutgers University. And today I'm going to be doing a Got Stress presentation for you all. It is a PowerPoint presentation as we are all on Zoom. But it does ask for participation because I feel like in the space that we are in right now, when talking about things like stress, it's really great to get some input from other people about how they're handling their stress. So we're going to be talking about stress. And really, when I think about the ideas of like what our goals are, it's really just to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on in your life and how stress impacts our day-to-day living. I'm looking at different ways that we can cope and the different types of coping skills that there are. And then really just look at some tangible things that we can do on a day-to-day basis outside of things like, speaking to a professional, going to the counseling and things like that, which are some of the resources that we have here at the university. And then also that you all have within your communities, within your schools. But I'm looking at some of the day-to-day things that we can be doing on our own and let you know that there are also resources that are available to the public through the university on our website, which is our Rutgers Student Health website, which is health.rutgers.edu. And so I'll be going over some of those as well. So when we talk about stress, or when you hear the word stress, what is the first thing that comes to mind? If you could just put that into the chat box, I'll give you a minute there. When you think about stress, first thing that comes to mind, and it could be a word. Again, you can change your chat feature directly into me if you want me to be the only person who sees it, that's fine. But kind of like a word association. First thing that comes to mind when you hear the word stress. All right, so we have overwhelmed, we have drained, okay, negative feelings, my head hurting after work. Yeah, absolutely. Being tired. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anxiety. Any others? Something you can't control. Okay. Being overworked. Sadness. Okay, thank you. Others. Being anxious. Thank you. And anything else? So now, does anyone think that they know? So they'll ask, I'm constantly thinking about said thing that makes, okay, the thing that makes you stress. Absolutely. Yeah, constantly thinking about that thing. I like to call that the hamster wheel of my stressful situations or anxiety itself. And those are the things that pop up for us and that sometimes keep us on that stress cycle. But when we think about the kind of textbook definition of what stress is, that's really some of the things that we think about going in this. But it's really just how our body responds to external things and internal things. And some of us deal with that external and internal stress fairly well in terms of being able to process the information. And some of us don't handle it well at all. And we feel the sense of being overwhelmed and, tired and anxious, absolutely, all kind of running the span of those things. But really, when we get down to the textbook definition of what stress is, it's really just how our body responds to our environment, what's coming at us from the outside, and then how that makes us feel on the inside and how we manage that. And when we think about stress, stress can actually be a good thing. It's one of those things that keeps us motivated to do our day-to-day tasks. If we didn't have some level of stress in our lives, we really may not get anything accomplished. We won't feel that necessary pressure to do things like getting our assignments in or going to work on time or any of those kinds of things. So stress is okay. It's actually a healthy part of our day-to-day living, but it's high levels of stress and long periods of stress that can actually have negative impacts on our body. And it's not just a physical space that it starts to impact, but also emotional impact that it has on our lives. And so that's what we're talking about, this idea that, yes, it's okay to have a certain amount of stress, but when we start to notice that those levels are either high or they're constant, that's when we need to be paying a little bit more attention. So I like to use the analogy of a stress bucket when I'm talking about stress. And so it's one of those things that when you picture it in your head, as you see on the screen, we all have a bucket in our lives or our daily life, day-to-day, situations that we're dealing with. And there's lots of things that are going into our bucket on a daily basis. And some of those things are coming at us full steam ahead. It's where I consider the faucet is wide open. That all that stressful stuff is filling up that bucket. If I turn around and, don't pay attention to it right quickly, that bucket can fill up. And that could be lots of different things for, all of you on the call right now. And so for some of us, that might be school. For some of us, that might be work stuff. For some of us, that might be family things. It just feels like if you take your attention off it for a minute, that bucket of stress will fill up really quickly and it'll overflow. Some of us have a tiny trickle of stress filling our bucket. Again, it could be family stuff, school stuff, work stuff, just general life, relationships, all those things. And it's not going to fill up as quickly as that full, faucet wide open situation. But, over time, if we leave this unattended and we're not, checking in on this, it'll definitely fill up. And then the last kind of level of stress that we have are these tiny little things that happen where we're like, oh, that's just a little drop in the bucket. This bucket will never fill up with this, type of stress or this kind of situation. I can definitely take my mind off of it for a while, continue on with my day-to-day things. I come back at the end of the day, this bucket will be nowhere near full and overflowing. And again, depending on where your levels of stress are and what the situations you have going on in your life, could be those tiny things. Now, the thing is, we are not constantly in either one stream or another. So we might have something that is coming at us in this kind of steady stream in the middle, and we're not really paying attention to it. And then we get one thing that happens, which is this tiny little drop in the bucket, and that's what makes the bucket overflow. And I've always heard of it kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back kind of analogy. And that's really what this tiny drop could possibly be. So it could be a nothing that's never going to fill up your bucket, or it could be the one thing that fills up your bucket and then makes it overflow. And we have all of these going on in our lives at any given time. And so what that does is that it puts us on what we consider a stress scale between a number 1 and a 10. And so depending on, how you're dealing with your stress and all those kinds of things, it could definitely put us in the situation of being somewhere in the yellow, which is between our 1s and 3s, somewhere between our 4 and 6.5, or we're up in the red area, in the areas of between the 10 and, between the 7 and the 10. And let's see what I was hoping to do. I don't think I have the feature to do that. Let's see. I do not. So what I would like you to do, if you can change your feature in the chat box, and if you are fine responding to the larger group, that's fine as well. But where would you consider yourself on the stress scale today? Between the number 1 and the number 10. If you could just type that into the chat box, again, you can direct it right into me. But where would you say your stress level is today on a Monday morning, February, kind of chilly outside, but it's supposed to be like 55 degrees today. Where's your stress level? Okay, got a 3, a 4, a 5, got 2s, a couple of 5s, a couple of 6, okay. 6, couple 3s between 5 and 7, and 8. Okay, 7, 7, a lot of 7s. Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Again, continue to put those in because it gives me a good idea of like how to continue. Oh, we got some 1s. Nice. I feel like I'm kind of coasting. I'm just coasting today. It's Monday. Right. And other people are like, it's Monday. When is it going to be Friday? And I'm already ready for the weekend. Absolutely. Thank you. And so some 7s. Awesome. Thank you for that. So then from there, when we think about this number, whether you put, between the 1 and the 10, whatever it is that you thought about, when you think about what's kind of putting you in these higher spaces, think about whatever that is. So what would you consider, and you don't have to put this in the chat box, what would you consider to be filling your stress bucket right now? Just think about that in your space. And if you want to share, feel free to go right ahead and put it in the chat box. But what might be the one thing that's giving you the most stress right now? Just think about that for a moment. And if you want to share it, feel free to go right ahead and put it in the chat box. College, school, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, filling out all those, homework, absolutely. School assignments, definitely. Friendship things, yeah, thank you. Money, thanks. Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Right. School is the biggest thing there. And I will tell you this, as someone who kind of works closely with our counseling center here at the university, School is one of the biggest things that students have stress and anxiety about. It's one of the main reasons that students are coming to the counseling center for stress, and it's stress related to their academics. So just know that you are not alone in that feeling of stress, especially around things like exam time, middle of the semester when those grades are about to come out, and then you get your grade and you're like, okay, now how am I going to do better next marking period? And so that's the space that we are kind of all in, or you're trying to start off the semester on a better foot and those kinds of things, especially as we get closer and closer to the end of the school year. Absolutely. So some other causes of stress, these are kind of the general ones that people say: their work, their finances, if they have a roommate or a housemate, their family situations are stressful, they're not getting enough sleep, their classes, they don't feel like they're eating well. And then you take all of that and you put things like remote learning and COVID all on top of that. It could definitely impact our stress on a day-to-day basis. When we generally look at the signs and symptoms of stress, sometimes we actually get physical pains in our body. The biggest one is sometimes you feel it in our chest area or in our stomach, where it feels like your stomach is in knots. And those are some of the things that we say are the indicators that you might be in that space of prolonged or high levels of stress in that red area of the 7 to 10. Other things that we get are our emotions are all over the place. You might have been happy, like 10, 15 minutes ago, and all of a sudden now you're sitting quietly with your thoughts that are spinning, spinning, spinning. And then you start to get in the stressful space where it makes it feel very emotional. Not necessarily to say that you're crying, but you feel it in your body in its emotional sense. And then we also get ruminating thoughts. And I think someone had already put in the chat box, you're constantly thinking about that thing that you're stressed on, and it goes in a loop and it loops. And then you find yourself not necessarily pacing physically, but in your mind, you're pacing because you're just replaying a situation that has already happened. And those are some of the most common symptoms and signs of stress. And what I really like to focus in on is how do we then alleviate this stress? So the spot where you see the drain coming out of the bucket, what are those things that we are doing to get rid of the stress? And so we're going to talk about these things kind of deeper in a sense. But a lot of times folks are in the space where they're doing things like meditation and they're trying to find times to connect with their friends. They're doing things in terms of self-care or talking to someone, or they're reading books, or they're trying to find any way that they can alleviate their stress in what they consider to be the most productive way. And so we all have a different way of managing our stress. Self-care is one of those big things that I really like to focus in on. It's one of my favorite things to do in terms of the work I do with our students here at the university, is talking about self-care. Because a lot of times when people think about self-care, they're only thinking like, oh, I might go to get a massage, or I might go for a walk. But then there's so many things that could be out there that are considered self-care practices. The other thing that we have are coping skills. So coping skills also falls into this general category of just being able to manage the day-to-day stress that we have. And so I really like to put this idea out there that if your body was physically sick, like you woke up in the morning and maybe you were, you had a sore throat or other physical ailment of some sort, you might take Tylenol, you might take a cough drop or something like that. I like to say, think of your mental health the same way. If you woke up in the morning and just in your head felt foggy, what are some of the things that you could say, all right, well, I know I can do this, this, and this to kind of clear that brain fog for me for the day. And so I generally say, treat yourself or your mental health as if you were sick. And so a lot of times people will need to make lists of all the things that you could do, in addition to going to your counselors at school or something like that. But that's the fun part. And that's where I really like to come in with talking about mental health as a day-to-day practice that we are doing to take care of ourselves. And our coping skills can be one of two things. We have coping skills that are problem-focused strategies. That means that a specific problem has a specific solution, because it might be an assignment that needs to get done, or studying for a test and things like that. So there's a problem and a solution. They kind of match up. And so if you've got a test coming up, that you need to put a certain amount of time to studying for that test. If you have an assignment that's due, you have to have a certain amount of time that's put towards that assignment. And that's a problem-focused strategy, whatever that strategy is, however you study and all those things. The other type of coping skills that we have are emotion-focused strategies. So let's say you have test anxiety and that you know no matter how much you study, when you sit down and take that test, you are going to feel stress in your body. And that's an emotion, even though you study, even though you're like, I have all this information, I know it like the back of my hand, but as soon as I sit down and take that test, I already know that I'm going to have this gut feeling like I'm going to fail. Like, right, it already comes on. I see some folks shaking their head. Absolutely. And that is an emotion focused strategy that we can pinpoint. So we do things like doing breathing exercises or even journaling before you take your test and putting your feelings on paper. And that focuses on the emotion, different from, you study for the test. So that's, a kind of problem solution situation. But your emotions are, they're not easily fixed by just studying. Sometimes you just have to kind of process through things. It might be that once you sit down at your test, at your desk to take that test, you do a quick, not even 5 minutes, because then you're running out of test time, but you do like a quick 1 minute breathing exercise or something to ground yourself before you take the test. And that's what we consider an emotion focused strategy. And so we all have different ways that we kind of, work through our coping skills. We're aware of our emotions. Sometimes we try to be mindful. Mindfulness is a really big thing, I will say, in terms of just narrowing it down to what mindfulness is knowing that your current situation is what it is, and you don't necessarily view it as positive or negative. You're just kind of living in the moment. Self-soothing practices, there are lots of different kinds. One of my favorite these days in terms of self-soothing, I actually just got myself a weighted blanket, which is now the love of my life. It's something you can just put on your body, and whatever it is, those little pellets inside that just makes you feel secure. Some people like to hold rocks in their hands that feel smooth if they're doing things like public speaking. So it's all of those different types of practices that we're doing to soothe our kind of, anxious emotional selves on the inside. We also have situations where we just distract ourselves in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's, just hanging out with our friends instead of, focusing on the problem that we might have, or we get lost in, a Netflix show or whatever the case might be. Self-care is on that list as well. Lots of different self-care practices out there, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. And then also having a crisis plan. I always say that that's a great thing to do. And our crisis plan, I know when I say crisis, it makes it seem very severe, but I like to think of the crisis plan as, what am I going to do when my security, blanket stops working? What am I going to do when this breathing exercise isn't helping anymore? Or, I've gone for the walks, I'm journaling every day, but I'm still feeling all this other stuff. That crisis plan is then, who do I call next? So I've run through the list and now I'm down at okay, I've done all the things that I can do on my own. Who can I call? What website can I go to look for information for myself? What friend can I reach out to? What family member, what community member, or what activity can I do? And that would be the crisis plan, how I like to envision it. And so sometimes just actually writing those things down helps us to put it somewhere. You write down your kind of go-to plan and then just stick it somewhere. So when your stress levels are starting to increase and you've done the breathing exercise, you've gone for the walk, but you're still kind of at this heightened space, you might say, okay, well, I know I can call this friend, or I know I can call this aunt, this uncle, this, my grandmother, whatever it is, a person you can trust to talk to. But you also know that there are 1-800 numbers out there that you can call to just talk to people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a crisis. The centers that are out there are sometimes just to listen to students, or that you can go to your guidance counselor, those kinds of things. And so that would be your crisis plan, and then writing those things down. So I really do like to talk about self-care kind of by itself, because lots of different things go into self-care. And one of the biggest things that we talk about is finding a way to rest and relax both your mind and your body. Now, for some of us, this could be meditation, yoga, going for a walk, and all of those things. So if you feel comfortable, feel free to type into the chat box, what is one thing that you do to just relax your body after either a stressful day at school, when you come home and you put your stuff down? What's the thing you do to just kind of calm before you either get into doing schoolwork or doing any of the, chores that you need to do at home? We've got stretching. Okay, thank you. Listening to music, taking a nice hot shower. Yes, thank you. Meditation, listening to music. Yes, music is one of my favorite things. It's a go-to. And it's interesting that sometimes even when I'm in a sad space, for some reason, listening to sad music helps. And I don't know what that's about. I still don't know what that's about. You would think that if you were feeling sad, you'd want to put on happy music to feel better, but that's not always the case. But yes, music, I feel like music speaks to lots of people. All right, so we have deep breathing exercises, also a couple more listening to music, going for a walk, petting my dog. Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Pet therapy is a thing. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not a thing. Here at the university, especially around midterm final times, we do de-stress events. And so our office usually brings in the mini horses that people just come and they like to pet the horses. I know we've had dogs, we've had cats come to campus, and I find the purring of cats to be so soothing. Absolutely. We got a couple of playing with my dog. Have an entire playlist dedicated to when I want to cry. Yeah, absolutely. Right. When you actually sit down and take the time to make a playlist and make yourself cry, that is actually doing the work, because there's this saying on Instagram that I saw. I can't even remember exactly what it is, but it's something along the lines of your emotions are like water and they're filling up your body. And if you don't let the water out, whether it's, crying, sweating, whatever it is, letting that water out, it'll drown you. Absolutely. So yeah, thank you for adding that. Yeah, so thanks for those. But yeah, we all relax in different ways. And so I don't have a specific tip here in terms of an actual thing that you can do. But on the Rutgers Student Health website, if you go to health.rutgers.edu, and I can put the direct link in at the end, there is actually a tab that's called self-help. And there are lots of different things like guided meditations, where you can listen to someone from the counseling center. So a guided meditation is generally the person will say, okay, well, close your eyes and get comfortable. You don't have to lay down or sit, but just visualize yourself in a calming space, whatever that is for you. And they actually walk you through the scenery. And some of them are short, they're about 5 minutes, and some of them are 15, 20 minutes. But those are all free resources that are there. And there's general like sitting guided meditations. And there's also a mindful walking meditation on there, which I've never done until I took that, downloaded that, the YouTube piece. And it was, when you walk outside, are you like just walking with intention? Or are you just like, okay, getting some exercise in? Or are you walking outside to just feel the air on your face? And if the sun is out, feel the sun on your face. And, what do you hear? What do you see? Do you hear the birds? Or is it just kind of like, just noise that you started to kind of cancel out when you actually start to pay attention to those things? So mindfully walking, how does the ground feel under your feet? How do your clothes feel on your body? Those kinds of things. And so it's just one of the practices that's out there, but that is a resource for free. It's available to anybody who comes to the website. And you can check that out there. Another resource or another kind of tip that's out there is knowing your early warning signs of stress and then being able to take action early. So this is just another kind of participation thing that we're going to do. And if you want, and I don't think you will have the ability to unmute yourself. So that's interesting. But our early warning signs come in lots of different categories. The first thing are physical warning signs. And so what I consider to be an early warning sign is however your body physically feels when you know your stress level has started to rise. And so for some of us, that's headaches. For some of us, that's your eyes start to hurt, or you get muscle tension. So what might be, if you think about it, what is an early warning sign of yours physically? Physical body difference that you can tell, like you're like, oh, I'm feeling X, so I know my stress might be starting to increase. Yeah, upset stomach. Thank you. Headaches. Yep. Lots of getting a headache. Yep. Thank you. Body starts to shake, getting annoyed, yeah, muscle tension. Okay, yeah, any others? Feeling tired, yep, absolutely. Chest tightens up. Okay, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, sometimes we don't even kind of notice it, but when we don't notice it in the forefront, we notice it on the back end where you're like, oh, I'm already stressed out, but now my body feels this way. So when we say noticing your early warning signs, it's when you know that you've got that headache, instead of saying, okay, just keep powering through, power through, acknowledge the headache and take care of the headache. You might, and again, going back to those, what are you doing to kind of de-stress? Or if you're noticing that pit in your stomach, what do you do to kind of fix it before it gets worse, kind of deal. But yeah, we all have different types of physical things that our body feels when we are having that stress increase in our body. The other way that we also experience the early warning signs of stress are emotional. And it could be, you're irritable. Someone just needs to say the wrong thing and you're like, done. Those are the kinds of things. But you know that about yourself. And so you understand that when you start to get, short-tempered, irritable, anxious, you yell at people when you usually don't, those kinds of things. When you can actually notice that early, you start to then take, some kind of practice to fix the situation. If you're starting to get anxious, or you're indecisive, you can't focus your brain, those kinds of things fall into this kind of emotional state. So you get angry, sad, all of those fall in here as well. I start feeling overstimulated and like there's too many things around me that, if it makes, yeah, absolutely. It absolutely makes sense. There's just too much going on where you want to like almost disengage, kind of go in your room, close the door. Absolutely. I understand. Others, let's see. I don't want to miss anything in the chat box. Opening and closing at the same time. The other space that we feel these early warning signs of stress are our behaviors, whether we decide to withdraw or we decide to just distract ourselves completely, working too much or not at all. We're arguing, we might start to argue with people we may not have before, or things like overeating, or oversleeping, or not eating enough, not sleeping enough, all of those things. Anything that changes your behavior could be an early warning sign of stress, especially if you know that there's, you're trying to get assignments in, or there's an exam coming up, or there's a family situation. There's lots of different behavioral things. What are some of the things that you guys have noticed about your behaviors when you're starting to feel stress? I think so, like some of these have kind of what I got up there with being annoyed and feeling overstimulated. Are there any specific behaviors? Taking anger out on other people? Yep. Yeah. Yeah, arguing. Tend to withdraw. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm actually a stress cleaner, which is good and bad. As a person who likes to, generally have a clean working space or a house. Anytime that we're in the office, I know one of my coworkers he's like, why do I smell like cleaning wipes? Are you okay? Because that's the thing. If I come in the office and I'm already like, okay, I need to clean my office before I work. It's like, okay, did you have a bad weekend? Because I'm a stress cleaner. And I noticed that about random things. So, when any type of stress starts to increase, if I know I'm cleaning things more often or like more thoroughly, because generally like I'm fairly clean. I like to wipe surfaces down, but if I'm breaking out the cleaning supplies, then I'm just like, but that's my way of managing my stress. But I noticed that about myself. Absolutely. Right. Organized. And arguing with family, yeah, right. Start to move things around and try to, get some sense of calm. Because for me, that's the way that I am regaining control of my space, or the thoughts that are going through my head, is that I can clean, I can organize the things. Absolutely, that's a behavior. The last area that we can start to recognize our early warning signs are the cognitive things, where we start to get overly self-critical. We get to, we're blaming ourselves about, all the things that are going on in our lives, even when they're not our, necessarily anything that we had to do with in terms of fault. I use that word very lightly, I should say. But there is nothing that we could have done to change the situation. It is kind of what it is, but we're blaming ourselves for the situation. That's definitely a space that when you start to see that stress increase, that we can get sometimes in that space. Right, so there's other cleaners on here as well. Thank you. Yeah, the desk in the room, those are the things. Like these are my spaces where I just need to, clear it out, to clear your head. Absolutely. But the thing about knowing the early warning signs, when you've already taken stock of, okay, physically, if I get stressed, this happens. I get a headache. And instead of it then starting to snowball, you can take a step back and say, okay, well, let me find a way to relax, some way whether it's journaling, meditation, whatever, going for a walk, talking to a friend, instead of letting it escalate. If you don't get the physical things, but you get the emotional things, or you get the behavior, the cognitive, when you notice those things start to pop up, that's when you say, okay, hey, my body's not feeling well. Let me take care of it instead of just ignoring it. So that's just another tip, knowing and recognizing those early warning signs of stress in our lives. Another thing that we can also do when talking about managing our day-to-day stress is prioritize the things that are going on in our lives. And so I know for you all, it's kind of hard, you're in a school space and, you have your parents, your guardians, kind of navigating your time, but we all also have our own personal daily things that we need to take care of. And we don't have necessarily enough hours in the day to do it all, everything, between the chores and school and family stuff and sports and all of that stuff. So we really do need to think about, how do we prioritize the things that we have going on in our lives? So we use what's called a Covey's time grid to kind of pinpoint the different areas in our lives that need our attention. And so what you can do on any given time is take your daily to-do list and separate it into these categories. And so the green area that you're seeing is what we consider urgent and important. These are the things that are absolutely, necessary to get done now. We cannot wait. We want to make sure that our, bills are getting paid if we're paying our own bills. If there's a family emergency that comes up, that's urgent and it's important. If you have a test tomorrow, that's urgent and important. If you have a paper due tomorrow, or at the end of the day today, that's urgent and important. That needs to get on top of anything else. And so when you think about all the things that you have, and let's say on a general like Monday, Tuesday, if you take all those things that you generally have to get done and prioritize them, that's when you can start to alleviate some of the stress of, I have so much stuff, so much stuff. The idea, and I'm sure you've all heard this, I have so much on my plate. Same idea. When you think about the plate that you have, how can you organize it so that it, doesn't feel as, overwhelming, like a Thanksgiving meal, like it's not just spilling over, but it's got some kind of, balance to it. So that first category is quadrant 1, urgent and important. The second quadrant is, it's not urgent, but it's still important. And these are the things that are, your self-care. You want to, continue to build strong relationships with your friends or your loved ones or your, the person you're dating, those kinds of things. You have goals for your future. You're applying for colleges and all that stuff. That's, it's not urgent, like needs to get done today on top of, in front of your exam that you might have tomorrow, but it's still important. And we want to make sure we make time for that. It doesn't have to be pressing, get done right this minute. You can make time for it later in the day or in the week and things like that. The other category is our yellow things. These are urgent, but they're not important at all in terms of things like interruptions, where you're sitting down and you're trying to study and then your cell phone rings and you're like, oh, I got to see what my friends want. And then you pick it up and now you're not, it's urgent because it came in urgent. I use that word lightly, but you pay attention to it because it's calling you right now, or it's, it's knocking on your door and asking you if you want to go outside, those kinds of things. People pleasing falls into this category as well. People pleasing would be the things where you put yourself second, third, or last to just make other people happy. And that's derailing from your studying and your, the goal setting things that you're trying to do. That falls into this category as well. Again, it's not, it's urgent because it's kind of knocking on your door right now, but it's not important and it can definitely wait. And those little things fall into that category. The last category are the things that are not urgent and not important, but they seem to take up all of our time in cases of social media and just scrolling through TikTok and Instagram. And you're like, where did 2 hours just disappear to when I should have been studying? Or just, sitting and gossiping with your friends or watching TV for hours and hours. All the things that we use to distract ourselves, getting lost in a video game, getting lost in just busy work, even getting lost in things like cleaning. I know if I get into the office and I've spent like an hour cleaning when I should have been like checking email, I'm like, what the heck did I just do? But, it's those cases of trying to manage all of the stuff that's on your day-to-day calendar. So that's just another one of the tips that's out there, that you don't need any guidance around. It's something you can take your general to-do list. You sit down. I know a lot of people like written calendars, or even if you have a digital calendar, something that does a day-to-day marking of kind of what you need to get done for the day, and organizing those things from one day to the next, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And knowing what you consider to be a priority. And that's the difference. This is what you consider to be a priority, not what somebody else is saying, hey, this is something you need to be focusing in on. But we can all take personal stock of our days this way. And so what kind of we manage out from there is the things that are in the green, you want to manage. Those are things you want to get done first. The things that are in that lighter greenish blue or gray category are the things we can definitely focus on. Yellow, use with caution, and we try to avoid the things in the red. And not necessarily avoid them completely, but avoid them if we definitely have a lot of things that fall into the green that we want to get done. And that's the big area that we have there with our time grid. Another thing that we can definitely do in terms of decreasing our stress levels is taking care of yourself. And that can be a number of things. For some of us, that is physical activity. It's getting out and walking. It might be getting exercise. That could be making sure that you're drinking water. And that's just water by itself. I know people say, oh, I have coffee or I have tea. Those things, yes, they are water-based, but just pure water by itself is so, so good for your body. And just doing even that small thing can have a big impact on your daily lives. Taking care of yourself could also be knowing that, hey, if I need to go to the counseling center or my guidance counselor, I'm going to make sure I make an appointment. I'm not going to just keep putting it off. Taking care of yourself could be, I'm going to take a nap because I'm tired. And that is me saying I'm intentionally laying down instead of just falling asleep. You're intentionally laying down in order to recharge your battery. Or taking care of yourself could be, you have a friend that you want to spend half hour, 45 minutes physically talking to or texting with, so that you feel connected in that connection of community. So yeah, taking care of yourself could be lots of different things, but it's the bigger thing that I want you to take away with this one is that it's putting yourself first, making sure that you're making time for yourself, and that school doesn't just become so overwhelming that you're tired every day because you're studying so hard every day, or you're getting all your work in on time, but you're not sleeping well. So really taking care of yourself is going to have a different meaning for each of us here on this presentation. Another thing that we talk about is putting joy in your life every day, not just waiting for Saturday, Sunday, the weekend, but every day. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. If you have a hobby, a skill that you like to exercise out, a pet that you love to just snuggle up with, a show that you like to watch, music that you like to listen to, whatever it is that puts a smile on your face and brings you some joy. Don't wait to just the weekend to do those things. You can, depending on what it is, you can find time to do that within your day, at the end of the day, in between things. For those of us on here who love music, if you're waiting for your bus or walking to school and you're popping in, the best playlist, not the one that's making you cry. We're not walking to school with the thing that makes us cry, but we're putting our earbuds in, we're listening to something that makes us feel good, on our way to school, on our way to where, our friend's house, wherever we're going. That's just finding, 5-10 minutes every day that we can bring some joy into our lives. Whether it's waking up a little bit earlier to, I don't know, do some yoga or meditation, or just sit by ourselves and read a book. Whatever it is that makes you smile and you happy, find time to do that every day. That it's the reward and not just waiting, oh, I'm going to reward myself at the end of the week, at the weekend, but you're finding joy every day. And that's kind of one of those bigger spaces that we have there. Another tip is asking for help when you need it. I know a lot of students get stuck in this idea that they're supposed to know how to do it all. And they don't ask for help when they need it because they're afraid of looking like they don't know what they're doing, or having imposter syndrome kind of deal. And it's okay to ask for help. The thing is, if you're struggling, and it doesn't even have to be that you're going to someone to ask for help, going online and looking to see, what's there is definitely one of those things that we can practice in a sense. If there's, let's say, I always say Google things. If there's a situation that you're dealing with and you don't know how to process it, I always say start with looking it up online, but making sure that you are looking at lots of different things, because not everything on the internet is, accurate. I would say that 100%.